Welcome to the War Games, your interplanetary gladiator arena. Today we're going to be talking about War Games by Paul Fortunato. Now imagine that on Earth, we finally, after decades and millennia of war and conflict, have finally achieved world peace. There's no conflict, everyone gets along, they have little implants in their brains if they have rage or anything like that, that just moderates their imbalances. Everything is just perfect. It's a perfect utopia. Until some aliens come down and determine that because we're so peaceful, we are technically a zoo species, and we're not even worthy of fighting in this arena, but we have to contribute anyway. So they put 100,000 humans in with all these other alien species in a fight to the death. But when the humans are dropped into this world, their little brain chip that regulates their emotions shuts off, and suddenly they have access to all those emotions like rage, hatred, and you know how humans can get when they have access to those types of things. So with that context in mind, let's dive into this year's War Games. Now, this book is written as a web series on a website called Royal Road, which basically means that the author can release one chapter at a time, and it kind of holds them accountable and allows it to feel a little bit more episodic. So it was kind of an interesting reading experience for me. I liked it because I kind of felt like a beta reader. I could go in, I could add comments and feedback throughout the story. So I could see a lot of value for an author if you are first starting out and you want to get a feel for how your book is going. This might be a good route for you just so that you can see the feedback that's coming in, and people will go in and correct any spelling mistakes so you have access to a bunch of editors. And then the author was able to interact with some of the commenters and say things like, oh, tell me your name and I'll add your name into the book to get eaten by the aliens or something. So it was a very interesting medium for a book. It was my first web series that I've ever read, so I thought it was pretty interesting. So let's start off with the immersion, the world building. I gave this an 8.5 out of 10. This was done actually pretty well. I really liked how he just kind of threw you into this world, kind of dropped you into this gladiator world arena without a ton of context, and you just get to see all these different plants and species and weather and aliens and technology, all these things coming together where it is explained as you go along, especially because the announcer is giving the rules as the players are interacting in the game. So that was also a good way to make it so that you're providing information without it feeling like an info dump or making it feel boring or out of context with the story. It was just a quick way to provide a snippet of information from the gamekeepers that just moved the pace along. So I thought it was really immersive. I was highly engaged with the story. I do think that because the pace was so fast, though, that we lost some of the depth that can come from the world building, where we were introduced to a lot of things really quickly, but we didn't get to explore them a ton with the character because he's basically fighting for his life. So I don't blame the author for that because you do want to keep those things moving. But at the same time, I think it's okay to slow down a little bit, explain the awe of the scenery and the confusion of the situation and a little bit more of those elements to explore and kind of slow things down from time to time to really get us immersed and engaged with the story. Next up, we have the names. The characters I gave a 7 out of 10. Now, I really liked Alan as a character. He's the main character, and it felt like, I guess I should mention that this was a LitRPG, and this was the first style of that book that I've read as well. So I've never really read LitRPG, so take my criticisms with a grain of salt because I don't know how this genre is structured, but this is just my opinion of it. I felt like a lot of the time, it felt like I was playing a one-player game, which maybe is the style that is going for with this medium. But because it felt like such a one-player game, I know we get some internal monologues from Alan, but I get a lot of satisfaction of learning about a character through dialogue. through how they interact in a group, how they interact with a partner. You get a little bit of that towards the end of the chapters that he's written so far, but I don't know. I felt like we could have gotten more of that to let us invest ourselves a little bit more in the characters. The second thing is that the dialogue sometimes, when it did happen, was very just short, sweet, to the point, moved right along. And again, I like there to be a little bit more exploration with the dialogue and a little bit more conflict, a little bit more conversation. If you read this book, it's online, so you can see some of my comments that I left, which again was a lot of fun for me to do. I felt like a beta reader, but you can see some of my more specific comments if you go to his book chapter by chapter. You'll see kind of my thought process as I was reading his story. So that part was kind of cool. But I mentioned some of those things in more depth with more specific examples in the story itself. So if you want to check that out, you're going to have to go click on his book and read through some of the chapters and see if my comments are valid to you. Now let's move on to the magic, or the technology in this case, which I gave a 9 out of 10. I thought the technology, the rules, the system all functioned really well, and it was really interesting. And it was just a lot of fun to read about the different capabilities and the different weapons, the different tools that he could access, the different perks, the one that gave him the berserker rage, the healing factor that gave him a ton of pain if he used it, the level ups that they had throughout the game to as they killed more of the creatures and fought for survival. Just all of those elements, if you love that style, again, like a video game where you're accessing a tool and putting it away in some virtual backpack, more or less, and calling upon it when you need it. There was a lot of that. Also the implant system where they're communicating inside of their heads. Like all of that stuff was super interesting and super fun to read about. So I think he did a great job explaining the rules of his world, explaining how the technology works, and then you get to really see it in action with a whole bunch of different scenarios. I think he did a phenomenal job with that particular category. Now for the infrastructure. This covers pacing, prose, plot, a lot of different elements. And for me, I had to give it a 7 out of 10. Let me tell you why. If you want a fast-paced story that just moves super quick, has no fluff, moves you from point A to point B really quickly, this is a great book for you to read. There's almost no downtime. It doesn't feel slow at all. The pacing is so fast. I like a fast-paced book, don't get me wrong, but I also like a little bit of time to slow down just so that I personally can get a little bit more invested in the characters so that I can feel the tension a little bit more, feel the suspense, root for their victories, and I just feel like I didn't get as much of that with the pacing of this story. But I do feel like it was written really well with like the prose. I thought that it was simple but engaging and fun, and so I thought he did a good job there. But the other thing I have to ding is the plot, because I was only able to read 23 chapters. That's up to date with what he's currently written, and I really enjoyed the story. I'm looking forward to the next chapter now. It was fun to read it in this style, to see how this platform works. If you're an indie author and you're interested in something like this, like, I think it'd be worth a shot. It's definitely worth the experiment, and I as a reader had a really good time with it. Like I said, it seemed more interactive with the author, whereas, you know, with a regular book, you just don't get that as much. You're not able to actually interact with the author and their work and express your opinions and get their feedback. So that was kind of a fun experience. But yeah, I have to ding it because the story's not done, and that score could go higher depending on how it ends. But I don't know how web serials work, if this just continues forever, if it even has an ending. I don't know. But for what we've got, I have to factor that into the consideration so that people know what they're getting into when they start this series. But it is free, like you're just reading it for free on this website, so it's a very low pressure, low entry way to explore this type of literature, this type of fantasy. So I think it's worth it because you're not losing anything. You get to go right to the chapters, see what you think of it, see the other comments, see what kind of community you can be a part of. So I think for that reason, it might be worth giving it a shot. And that leads to my enjoyment of the story, which I gave a 9 out of 10. It was so much fun to read. The combination of the story itself, which was super fun to see the main character get access to his emotions again, kill to survive, struggle in this new world, and comprehending what the hell is going on. Super, super fun. Fast paced as well. So I kind of like that because it allowed me to get through the story really quickly, even if I would prefer some things to be explored more in depth. For this format, I think it worked really well. And then the second thing that I really liked was, again, seeing the community that is being built around this story, being able to interact with other readers and the author with the story as I'm going through it. I thought that was really fun. It was like being a beta reader, but with a whole community and in real time. So if you like that type of thing and you want to give it a try and see, one, how it works for you as an author, or even as a reader, how it feels to be part of a community where everyone is experiencing this book for the first time and you get to, have conversations with people, I thought it was kind of fun. So that leaves War Games with an overall score of 8.1 out of 10. I would definitely recommend this one. Even though it's not finished, I feel like it's a super low barrier to read this book. I feel like it's done enough where you can get a lot of satisfaction out of reading it. And because it feels episodic, it almost feels like it doesn't necessarily need an ending. And this could just go on forever and you can just enjoy those episodes as they come out. So I would recommend it. I really enjoyed it, but you'll have to let me know what you think. Now, War Games, like I said, was a web series, so we're going to just look at the cover right here. I think this is a great cover. I think it's simple, but you do get that classic sense of fantasy with a protagonist holding an axe in this crazy kind of a world. I love the colors and the dark kind of hues, the grimness of it. So I would say that this cover is actually pretty good. Approved. So let me know what you think of my first LitRPG book review. Am I off on how I have interpreted this style? Or is this pretty much on brand with how this genre works? Let me know in the comments. And if you've made it all the way to the end of this video, be sure to like it and join the Indie Fantasy Club. Join this community of indie fantasy authors, indie fantasy readers, so that we can continue to grow this community. And if you haven't already, be sure to check out some of my other book reviews on the channel to see how your book might stack up for my personal ranking system. But that'll do it for today. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.